Dr. Aries Thorne, humanity's finest xenolinguist, traveled to the alien world of Xylos on a desperate mission. Her purpose: to negotiate a treaty with the native Xylons to save a dying Earth, which desperately needed the planet's resources to survive. Upon arriving, she was brought before their leader, Kalen, an impossibly tall, graceful figure who radiated silent authority. But Ares's confidence soon shattered. All her advanced technology and linguistic expertise proved useless against the Xylons' impenetrable silence. Every attempt she made to communicate was met with nothing, leaving her desperate and realizing for the first time in her life her words had failed. The breakthrough, when it came, didn't emerge from a data stream or a deciphered algorithm. It came from a moment of pure, unadulterated desperation. After another failed session, Ares had slumped against a wall in the Great Hall, the weight of her failure pressing down on her. A silent Xylon attendant, one who had observed her daily struggles, with a quiet stillness, seemed to sense her crushing frustration. The attendant gently touched her arm and led her away from her useless technology, away from the silent council chambers, and deep into the planet's bioarchives. It wasn't a library of books or data chips. It was a living library, a vast, cavernous network where Xylon history was literally encoded into the glowing DNA of the plant life. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and a strange electric ozone. Here, etched in luminous shifting patterns upon the walls of a vast cavern, ancient glyphs told a very different story from the one Ares had been sent to write out. This was not a history of treaties, or exploration, or trade. It was a prophecy. The glowing glyphs spoke of a speaker who would arrive from the stars. But this speaker was not meant to talk with their mouth. They were meant to listen with their very selves. The prophecy foretold that this speaker was destined to join with the Xylon leader in a profound biological symbiosis, a ritual they called the convergence. It was their truest, most sacred form of communication, a physical and mental bond that would merge two beings into one, creating not a document, but a living, breathing treaty. The whole fated mates thing was a classic, almost laughable science fiction trope. But Ares was now facing the terrifying, undeniable reality of it. Her blood ran cold as the attendant guided her to the final, most sacred glyph. It depicted the speaker, a figure from another world, joining with the Xylon leader. The speaker's face, rendered in shimmering, living light, was an unmistakable, terrifying mirror of her own. The shock was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Her mission was a lie. Her life's work was a lie. She wasn't a diplomat. She wasn't a linguist. She was a biological key, a puzzle piece grown and cultivated on a dying world, sent across the galaxy not to talk, but to be assimilated. She wasn't a savior. She was a sacrifice. The initial shock quickly curdled into a cold, burning rage. Ares was a scientist, a woman of logic and reason. Her entire identity, her self-worth, was built on the foundation of her intellect, her ability to solve problems with her mind. To be reduced to a mere biological component, a missing piece in some mystical alien prophecy, felt like the ultimate violation. She felt like an animal being led to slaughter, and the betrayal cut deeper than anything she could imagine. Her own command. The very people who had lauded her as a genius, they must have known the truth. They hadn't sent their best linguist to do a job only she could do. They had sent a living, breathing bargaining chip. They had traded her mind, her body, her very existence, in exchange for planetary resources. The thought made her sick. So she rebelled. With a newfound bitter fire, she doubled down on her original mission. She tried to force a verbal dialogue, practically shouting her linguistic formulas and grammatical trees at the silent, watching Xylons. She recited Shakespearean sonnets and complex physics equations into the unmoving air of the Great Hall. Her pleas, now laced with fury, were met with the same patient, unnerving quiet. It was maddening. She was a woman of words, and they had taken her words from her, leaving her with only a destiny she absolutely refused to accept. She was torn. A deep, primal conflict raged within her. On one side was her duty to the 8 billion souls on Earth, a humanity that had deceived her but was still her own. On the other was her own fundamental right to choose her own fate, to exist as an individual and not as a tool. Was it her duty to lay herself down on the altar for a species that had lied to her? Or did she have the right to fight for her own life, even if it meant condemning her whole world? As Eris wrestled with her internal demons, something unexpected began to shift in her tense, silent encounters with Kalen. The stoic, imposing leader seemed to sense the war inside her. He began to lead her away from the sterile meeting rooms, personally guiding her through the real Xylos. He showed her things that words could never describe. He led her through forests where the towering, crystalline trees sang in a low, vibrating harmony that resonated in her bones. He took her across vast fields where the iridescent grass communicated not with sound, but with waves of shifting, colored light. He couldn't speak to her, not in her language, but he began to share his world with her in a more profound way. He would gently lay his hand on the bark of a singing tree, and Eris would feel a phantom sensation in her own mind, a deep cellular understanding of its ancient life. He would look towards the planet's twin moons hanging in the purple sky, and she would suddenly be struck by a feeling of the planet's deep, cosmic loneliness. Through these silent, shared moments, she slowly, reluctantly, started to get it. The Zealands weren't conquerors looking to absorb another species. They were dying. He showed her the evidence. A slow, creeping blight, a kind of biological silence, was spreading across the planet. It was quieting the singing forests, dimming the light fields, and severing the empathic connections between his people. It was a disease that attacked their very method of communication, their ability to reproduce, their collective soul. Their entire species was facing a quiet, lonely extinction. The convergence wasn't an act of domination. It was their last, desperate hope for survival. It was a merging of two species so that both could adapt, combining humanity's chaotic resilience with the Xylon's deep interconnectedness. Through his shared feelings, she saw the immense, crushing burden he carried as his world slowly faded. Against all her instincts, against her rage and her fear, her terror started to twist and morph into a strange, terrifying empathy for the silent alien who was her intended mate. But while a fragile, tentative understanding was beginning to bloom, on the surface of Xylos, paranoia was taking root in the cold void above. A garbled, partial data burst about Eris's true mission, the prophecy. The convergence reached the human fleet, maintaining a nervous orbit around the planet. The fleet's commander, a hard-nosed military man named Valerius, was a man who saw threats in every shadow and treachery in every silence. He interpreted the data in the most terrifying way possible. He became utterly convinced the convergence was a biological weapon. He believed the Xylons planned to absorb Eris, assimilate her knowledge of human defenses, and turn her into the first mind of a new, aggressive hive consciousness designed to attack humanity. Simultaneously, a faction of Xylon traditionalists, who had watched Kalen's interactions with the alien with growing horror, rose up on the planet. They saw the ancient prophecy not as salvation, but as blasphemy. They believed that merging with a chaotic, individualistic outsider like a human would corrupt their species' essence, accelerating the blight and finishing them off for good. To this xenophobic faction, Dr. Aris Thorne was a contamination, a disease in her own right. On both sides, the engines of war began to spin up. In orbit, the human warships began powering their primary weapon systems. On the planet below, the ships of the Xylon dissenters rose from hidden valleys, moving into attack formations in the skies. The very connection that was supposed to build a bridge between their two worlds had instead become the flashpoint for an interstellar war. A war about to be fought from two directions, with Aris and Callan at the epicenter, the voice of Commander. Deliriers boomed through the Xylon council chamber, a crackling, tinny ultimatum from the fleet's open channel. You will release Dr. Thorne, unharmed, within one solar cycle, he declared, his voice rigid with military certainty. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war. We will liberate her by force. On the planet's surface, Iris could feel the new, hostile vibrations through the floor. The Xylon dissenters were moving, storming the capital. Their goal was to sabotage the convergence chamber and assassinate their own leader, Callan, to stop the Union. War wasn't just a distant threat anymore. It was seconds away, a pincer movement of fire and fury closing in from the sky and the ground. In the midst of the rising chaos, Callan turned to Aris, the weight of both their dying worlds reflected in his silent, searching gaze. He reached out, not with his hand, but with his mind. He sent a single, clear, unambiguous feeling directly into her consciousness. The choice is yours. He would not force her. He would let his entire world, his entire species, burn to honor her free will. And in that singular, selfless moment, Aris finally saw the truth. This wasn't surrender. This wasn't assimilation. This was connection. This was trust. This was the ultimate act of communication, a gesture more powerful than any word she had ever learned. It was a choice, freely given. Standing before the open channel broadcasting to the human fleet, with the tremors of the Xylon assassin's approach growing stronger, Aris made her choice. She keyed the comms, her voice shaking but firm, resolute. This is not a surrender, Commander, she said, her words echoing in the sudden silence of the chamber. It is our salvation. She turned her back on the image of the human fleet, on Delirious' shocked face, and willingly walked with Callan into the heart of the convergence chamber. As the great stone doors sealed behind them, plunging them into a soft, biological light, the first weapon systems on both sides achieved full charge. The convergence was not a loss of self. It was an explosive, infinite expansion. As their bodies met, Aris's mind fused with Callan's. It wasn't painful. It was a flood. She felt the cool, serene rush of 1,000 years of Xylon history. Their collective consciousness, their deep, cellular bond with the living fabric of their planet. She felt their peace, their sorrow, and their silent, fading hope. In return, Callan, through her, experienced the fierce, chaotic, beautiful storm of human individuality for the first time. He felt the burn of ambition, the sting of loneliness, the joy of artistic creation, and the overwhelming power of our capacity for both incredible, selfless love and terrible, world-shattering violence. From their union, from this new shared consciousness, a wave of pure, unfiltered understanding pulsed outwards. It wasn't language. It was raw, shared experience, broadcast on a psychic frequency that no one knew existed. The human fleet, fingers tense on their triggers, was suddenly and completely flooded with the crippling, ancient fear of extinction that the Xylans felt every day. Commander Valeris stumbled back from his console, overwhelmed by a sorrow that was not his own. The Xylon assassins, poised to strike the chamber doors, were slammed with the full force of humanity's desperate, tenacious hope to survive, the fierce love for their children, their art, their memories. The barriers of language, biology, and mistrust didn't just fall. They were rendered utterly meaningless. Across the system, weapons powered down. The fleets, both human and Xylan, stood silent and motionless, humbled by a profound truth they could feel in their very souls. The war was over before a single shot was ever fired. Aris was no longer just Aris, and Kalen was no longer just Kalen. They had become something entirely new. They were the living treaty, the first bridge between two worlds, a singular being, born of two species. Their connection, a relationship born of a strategic lie and destined by an ancient prophecy, didn't start a war, it forged a lasting peace that mere words never, ever could have.